Here comes Grim.
Hello, lovelies. So let's give you some updates and comment replies and so on. It's nearly finished the first draft of the Choose Your Own Adventure erotica book, so that'll be good to get out of the way. I started the year wanting to clear my plate of work and take some time to do other things, and it's nearly the end of the year and I finally managed to do that. So there you go, I guess. Yeah, the work is usually somewhat fun, and part of the way I deal with depression and other issues is to make sure that my dance card is pretty full, so that I have a web of obligations and things that I actually have to stay motivated to do. But it seems that backfired a bit this year, so there's that to consider. Speaking of adult content, I did a few lore dump videos as a kind of experiment this last while, with specific reference to the Tabletopless games, and in particular the Tabletopless Vampire game and the Tabletopless Aerotech game. The Vampire videos did quite well, considering, you know, the kind of thing that they are, getting around 300 views, which for something that isn't, you know, angled to try and grab a lot of attention is reasonably good on this channel. You know, I know I'm a niche, so I don't expect thousands or tens of thousands of views or anything. And so, encouraged by that and thinking that D&D was a bigger pull, I did some more lore videos based on the Aerotech campaign, and those did abysmally. And looking back at those videos, even though both are marked as content not for children, I think I was more explicit about the Aerotech stuff being not safe for work than I was about the vampire stuff being not safe for work. So where the vampire videos got in the region of 300 hits, the Aerotech videos got in the region of 50 hits, right? So 1/6 the amount. Now clearly they're similar sorts of videos. Vampire is a much smaller game than D&D, so the only really significant, meaningful difference is that the D&D videos should have been more popular, given it's the more popular game, and that I actually was more explicit about them being not safe for work and linking to the Tabletopless site, and that's it. So that just goes to show starkly how videos get suppressed if they're dealing with adult content of any way, shape or form, even obliquely. That's kind of depressing and annoying. You know, you've got a lot stacked against you as an independent content creator, as an independent publisher, and then this moralistic squeamishness about adult material really doesn't help, even when you're not being particularly explicit. So yeah, that's kind of depressing, isn't it? Right. So it's Armistice and Remembrance this weekend. Some of you may have noticed that I wear a white poppy, and I usually mention it every year around this sort of time. I wear the white poppy because the red poppy has become increasingly jingoistic. It has become, for a lot of people, particularly on the right, a sort of celebration of war and a fetishization of the military and of sacrifice. And so I personally simply don't feel comfortable wearing a red poppy in remembrance anymore, despite being proud of what my grandparents did during the war, World War II, obviously. Particularly my grandfather, who cleared mines on D-Day, who helped liberate Belsenbergen as part of the Wiltshire Regiment. There's a lot to be proud of there in my family's past. Not that it's my deeds, so I don't really have any place being proud of it. But I want to commemorate that sacrifice, that work, but without the kind of hysterical jingoism that we tend to see in the media. This whole fuss about the march and the cenotaph and hysteria around poppy sellers and so on. I don't want any part of that, but I want to remember it in my own way. Of course, this year it feels particularly keen, given what is going on between Israel and Gaza in the wake of the terrorist atrocities that we saw. I put out a video fairly early after the terrorist attacks on Israel, and some people seem to have watched that and not taken into account when that video was made, and the anti-Semitism, even for someone who is not even Jewish, is pretty wearing. And I feel again massively alienated from my own tribe on the left, because they're barely hiding their anti-Semitism at this point. And it is an issue on the left because there has tended to be a conflation between anti-Jewish conspiracy nonsense and anti-capitalist non-conspiracy nonsense. I'm sure we're all aware of the stereotypes. Of course, it isn't helped by the fact that Israel's far-right government has done exactly what anybody could have predicted would happen in this instance, what Hamas no doubt predicted would happen in this instance, and have aggressively gone to essentially destroy and annex Gaza, so it would seem. So maintaining sympathy for what happened to Israel is not a popular position amongst a very large group of people, and maintaining sympathy for what is currently happening in Gaza is not a very popular position amongst an awful lot of people. Nuance, as we often comment on this channel, is not a popular thing, unfortunately. But this is yet another example of how one of Rutger Bregman's commandments makes a great deal of sense, which is temper your empathy, train your compassion. Because if we just empathize with Israel, then we can see that there are good reasons for them to be angry and to lash out, just like America did after 9/11. We can feel what they feel about the threat of mass death and genocide in the aftermath of the Holocaust. So we can understand why there is such fury and determination and horror, even while that is creating more horror. With empathy, we can also understand the plight of the Palestinians, and we can understand why they would engage in asymmetrical warfare, terrorism, atrocities, and so on the other way. So where does that leave us? That leaves us empathizing with both sides, understanding and even excusing why they're doing what they're doing. So empathy is not particularly useful here. Compassion, however, will have us staying and looking on and thinking, okay, how do we get out of this? What would have been the better response? How can things move forward so that people are less murderous towards each other? And that's why compassion is much more useful than empathy and much more open to nuance, which of course is terribly unpopular. Alright, heavy stuff out of the way. On to comments. On the Aerotech lore dumps, Trollsmith said, have you read Camille Paglia's Sexual Personae? This feels like hints of that. I have not read that. It will go on the list of intellectual books I haven't read and need to. Tachyon Blue says, sounds like an interesting world. Haven't played Aerotech before, though I've seen it on your website. It's erotica themed? Yes and no. It's a world that encourages those sorts of things and indulges those sorts of things, in which sex and reproduction is thematically and narratively important and tied up in the overall themes, pun intended. Yeah, there are booklets available, gazetteers basically, which detail different areas and races and things. So Charlie Dallencourt says, being the 69th view on a not safe for work D&D game is hilarious. Yes, 69, nice. Jack Fetch says, are you going to be publishing this setting in the future? Because I'd definitely be interested in buying a copy. You can get the gazetteers now. Whether I end up compiling that into a full setting book will depend whether the campaign completely runs its course or not, I suppose. Going back some ways, on a review I did of Warlock, Paul Berry says, if the OSR is stuck in a D&D rut, which genres are fit to be adapted? Is D&D a genre, or is fantasy a genre? So there are other games that I would describe as non-OSR, as non-D&D OSR. Things like Advanced Fighting Fantasy, Maelstrom, to an extent the Lone Wolf RPGs, things like that. There's a few others, some ill-fated, some less ill-fated. So games-wise, I think it depends where you put the cut-off point. I would say maybe, when does something become vintage? It's 25 years, I think. So anything more than 25 years old, maybe 30 years old, might possibly be remade in old school. I also think that, given the stupid crackdowns on piracy, retrocloning may be a way to resurrect and keep a lot of older games, more obscure games. Of course, the trick will now be getting hold of copies of things like Bushido, Boot Hill, and so on, so that you can do that. So there's plenty, but I don't think it's genres necessarily. I think it's a combination of genre and system. Like, it would be nice to have a non-shitty Star Frontiers retroclone, for example. On the video where I insisted I was not a guru, people left publicly or privately some very nice comments. Midnight Green said, you have the uncanny ability to deflect, or at least appear to, criticism. You talk about your problems, but seem to be very self-aware. I can also attest that self-awareness is a bloody curse. Give yourself a bit of credit, man. Tate became popular because he is successful and macho and projects confidence. He's lucky. His masculinity strikes me as profoundly insecure, and while he projects confidence, I don't think confidence to that degree, overconfidence, is a healthy thing. It's like the actual difference between masculinity and toxic masculinity. Toxic masculinity is often what are otherwise positive masculine traits taken to a pathological degree. I think self-awareness is good. I think doubt is good because it constantly forces you to justify yourself and think things through. But I will not be giving myself credit. And while the compliments and so on are very welcome and very nice, I'm bad at taking compliments. If my advice or my commentary helps people, great, but I don't want to become that, however much that might be profitable. On the Planescape review, which some other people have been doing some interesting reviews of Planescape lately as well, I kind of skipped over the adventure part because I'm just not interested. But Diversity in Dragons, while horribly slanted in his point of view, did go over that a bit. So if you feel that there were gaps in my Planescape review, go and watch his. He's far more negative. I think I was more fair. Mahadros says, something I noticed as you were flipping through. These new hobby books look more like coffee table books you're meant to flip through and marvel at the pictures / layout rather than actually used for a game. They're all splash and flash with no intention of delving deeper. Yeah, they don't take the time or the space to really go over things. As for them being coffee table books, I don't think the art is really, in a lot of cases, of a high enough standard for that to be the case. Second edition, while the production values might be lower for a lot of the material, it's far more visually interesting. And even though they brought back the original artist to do some art pieces for Planescape, I think that their older work was more characterful and more impactful in a lot of ways, and that this wasn't. So I don't think it succeeds even as a coffee table book, but you may be right that that's part of the attempt of keeping these old settings alive to some degree, but it's just not effective. The style, the art direction for most of 5th edition is not my bag. There's only one Kalergi comment that I'm going to bring up, but it's indicative of other comments, public and private. Swamp Life says, thank you for debunking this, Rabbi, which obviously is sarcastic and just an example of the degree of nonsensical suspicion and anti-Semitism that goes on out there. Zang. Tal, friend, and welcome to Gore. Savage and beautiful, John Norman's Gorean saga is brought to life in the Tales of Gore role-playing game and its companion world book, World of Gore. Take flight on a tarn, luxuriate in the bathhouses of Ar, pit your steel against the deadly Kuri, best your enemies and place them in your collar. Tales of Gore uses the D6 system, perfect for both new and old players. You can purchase it from Amazon, RPG Now, or lulu.com. Ta Sada Gore.
And this is not a time to be dismayed. This is punk rock time. This is what Joe Strummer trained you for. It is now time to go. You're a good person. That means more now than ever.